Hey guys, I just wanted to show you just a couple minutes here of some of the stuff that I was working on when I entered the mix competition for the song Money by The Warning. I'm not allowed to share the source files with you guys, so I can't solo it all and give it to you or give you the actual files themselves. They supplied us with 1 full minute, 1 minute and a few seconds of the song Money by The Warning, when we paid for membership and entered the competition to mix it again. Some of the files that we got are clearly pure raw source files, directly recorded, what was actually tracked. Some of them have been strongly processed, like the lead vocal parts had already been quite seriously processed by the time they were in this mix, which is unfortunate, but at the same time it makes it easy to sound like the original in that way. And some of it was well balanced and a lot of it was not well balanced, but there was a lot of work to do to make it, for example, if you wanted it to resemble David Bendeth's mix of the song, there was a lot of work to do to make it do that. And I wanted it to be similar to Bendeth's mix because it's an amazing mix, but I personally would have made a few different choices than David Bendeth would have. So let's look quickly at what we got from this. Now, this is my mix, so I've already done a lot with this. But if you look on the left side, let me see. How do I point to the left side? Okay. So if you look to the left side over there, there's a column to the left that says drum bus, kick 01 main, kick 01 chorus, snare top, new whatever gate, snare sample 02, hi-hat, extra hi-hat, tom 3 sample, tom 3, overheads, room printed off, reverse crash, extra crashes, etc. So I color-coded this when I got it. This is the DAW that I like to use. It's called Reaper. I'm a licensed user of it. I own it. It's by far the greatest DAW in the world, in my humble opinion. I've worked with pretty much all of the major DAWs out there. So anyway, just if you're wondering what it is, that's what I'm working on. But it doesn't matter. All DAWs do the same stuff, and they all work in similar fashions, just with more or fewer steps to do so, and more or less flexibility, and more or less capability, right? But they can all do this basic stuff themselves. So I colored all of the drum tracks green when I got them. I colored all the bass tracks purple, whatever. Often the gray ones are my own tracks that I added. Orange is all of the guitar tracks. There's 2 special effects tracks for the cash register. I colored them green. And blue is all of the vocal tracks. So there's cool stuff in here. Look down here on the left here in the vocals. 37 track number. It says number 50 on the left on the blue, but the track number that was called before I added all of my extra tracks is called 37 BG Vocal Pow High 01, and 38 is BG Vocal Pow Low 01. 39 is BG Vocal Haze and Woes 01. And 41, track 40, which is my track 53, BG Vocal Cash Money 01. So that's pretty cool, all these different things. False octave vocal Danny, VS, which I guess is verse, I don't know. Vocal doubles, Danny Breath Dawn. I named it Dawn if his track I created. Lead vocal 01, slap, which was an effect, a slap echo that they put on it, which I couldn't stand, so I took it out. Guitar, overdrive, solo, octaves, guitar, first verse, backwards. Baritone guitar right, baritone guitar left, so she played a bari guitar for some of the rhythm stuff. Bussing is, I take all the guitar channels and I throw them into one fader so I can mute all of the guitars at once or solo them all at once. Bass, so there is a bass overdrive channel, a bass sub channel, which is a sub octave they added. Bass SansAmp is a industry standard bass guitar pedal that emulates sort of the sound of an Ampeg SVT with a cabinet and optionally a bit of overdrive with lots of really cool blend effects and stuff like this. It's a great way to plug a bass directly into it and then into your board to sound like you're going through a huge rig when you're not. Then bass SVT, I presume they either went through an actual SVT, which they probably did, knowing them, or they had an SVT emulator, but probably it was a big bass SVT amp that they actually mic'd up. Then I added my own sub bass because I didn't like theirs. Then I added my own bass amp modeling because I didn't like theirs. And I wanted more flexibility over it. See, The SVT is great, the SansAmp is great, but these are already tracked this way. Like I can't edit the settings on the SansAmp or the SVT. There is a bass DI, which is her bass directly plugged into the board, tracked directly. So we have that to work with. So then I took that and I put that through my own bass amp modeler, or I put it through my own sub bass. Then there's the bass bus to turn her on and off completely, soloed. The effects, shaker and tambourine, which were added by Bendith, and the ladies of the Warning really didn't want that. Mono room mix, all these different drum mixes, right? Mono room mic, extra crashes, reverse crash, rooms printed off. So in other words, he had like a rooms mic where he then printed it to tape. I'm okay with it. I get why it's there. I don't use it often. Overheads, which are the two mics that you get over top of the drum set pointing down towards the cymbals generally. It's a good way to pick up all your crashes and stuff. Tom 3. This is the only tom we use in this song, because even though she has multiple toms, there's only one, it's only 1 minute of the song here. So Tom 3 and Tom 3 sample, which I believe is a sampled tom that they triggered from the Tom 3 mic. Extra hi-hat, I don't know. I guess maybe there's an overtrack or an extra part, or maybe it's a loop. Hi-hat, the actual hi-hat part, or it could have been a separate mic for the same hi-hat. Snare bus, I created that because there are lots of snare options here. The snare top mic, they called it new gate, so it was a gated top mic, but it was a mic, and then they went through a gate so that it silences the sound after below a certain level and after a certain number of milliseconds. Snare sample, that's a sampled snare, I guess, and here's a snare sample. Mutt Lange, who of course is a legendary producer, who kind of was one of the guys who really made using a sample of a great sounding snare triggered by the sound of the actual snare blended into the studio. He made that legendary and used it all the time. Def Leppard, Pyromania, and Hysteria, those two albums. Back in Black by AC/DC, and For Those About to Rock by AC/DC, those two albums. Amazing, incredible snare sounds, right? I used to absolutely adore that sound. I like absolutely way better than any other of the competition, any other way to do it. I vastly preferred it. Now I hear artifacts when I listen to those recordings, and it bugs me. I try not to blend them strongly between the original and the samples, or I try not to blend multiple samples because I find you get phasing issues and stuff. But I also love the sound of his snare. It's incredible the way he did it in Money. It's a trade-off. You can choose to use samples and you might end up with a couple of artifacts, but then the sound is amazing and it's totally worth it. Or you can try to work with what you have. I tried to work with the main snare mic. Kick in the chorus and kick in the main. That's just because I split it. It was one kick track, but I split it and I mixed it differently for each section. And then there's a mute track for the entire drum bus, which allows me to make sure that it's muted before the drums come in, because there is a lot of noise in the initial input, so I wanted to gate that. Anyway, that's the basics of what we have here to work with. So when I was doing this mixing, I wanted to take the same concepts and the same basic sounds that David Bendith had come up with and try to have it slightly less produced sounding. I wanted it to be a little drier. So to do that, you have to be really dry, and then you can start warming it up and thickening it up. So let's listen to the drums, just for the entry. Let's actually listen to just the kick, okay? So we're going to listen to it without my processing. That's the kick microphone. That's the kick mic, the track that I was given. Hear that rumble between each one? Ding, 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 ding. There's a low rumble there. I can't stand that. If we want to add that, we'll add that, but we'll add it using our own effects. It's just this constant low noise that is horrible if you have a subwoofer set up. So the first thing you want to do is gate it. So a gate is this. It senses the start of the sound and the length of the sound, and after it goes below a certain threshold, it'll start to close it off. So let's listen to the difference. I'll turn on the gate after it starts. No gate. Let's add the gate. See? So you want to find just the right point so it doesn't affect the sound quality, but cuts it off when the signal gets low enough. Too low and it doesn't do anything. Too high and it does this. It's actually affecting the sound. So that's good. That's a little drier. Then I didn't love the EQ. I wanted to brighten it up. I don't hear enough of the attack. The beater hitting the drum head, that's an incredible sound that you want to get. You want it somewhere between like 3,500 and 4,500. I actually put mine at 33, or actually 3.35k hertz. But here we go. So let's listen to the difference. This is as it was with my gate. Now I add my EQ. Turn off the EQ. It's brighter now. Now we're going to add a limiter, and this is going to bring up the general level, but also make sure it doesn't go out of see, if you look at my track down here on the left, it's peaking a lot. I mean, that's okay. These are virtual tracks. So in Reaper, I know for a fact that I have basically infinite headroom in the track. So don't worry about the fact that the track is going red at the bottom. So now let's put the limiter on it. So the limiter does control it. See? This fader down here, it's no longer peaking red. So that's what I did with my kick. Now let's bring in the snare. So this is my snare bus. This is just my snare bus. None of the other microphones or anything. So you notice there's 3 tracks going on here. Snare top, snare sample, and snare sample. Let's listen to each one. This is her actual drum mic. I'm going to turn off the effects. See how my effects changed it? This is the sound of the microphone pointing at the top of her snare drum that was recorded. This is the only actual snare sound of her actual snare drum that I was given as a track. And you can hear it, I was gated. It's called snare gated. You can hear it gates. I wish it wasn't gated. I would have preferred to gate it myself, but anyway, it is what it is. Let's add a sample. Let's listen to the first sample. See, I had the sample really low. You can see the fader's low. It's a good sound, but I don't love it, but it adds a little bit of body to the sound. Let's listen to this sample. This is the Mutt Lange sample. It's also very low in the mix. He had it, I think, quite high in the mix, and it's a great sound, but I wanted it lower in the mix. I could be wrong about what he did. So let's listen to the entire snare sound from those 3, but without any processing by me. The only thing I've done is change the relative levels, as noted. I wanted mostly her actual snare there with lots of crack, and the sample's low. There you go. So let's look at the effects that I added. Hear that? That's what I did. So, what did I do? EQ. Let's add some bottom to it. And a little bit, add a little more crack. There you go. I like that. Reverberate. So this is a reverb plugin. Very short. You want to hear what just the reverb sounds like? So that's what I'm adding with that reverb plugin. It's dark on purpose. See the low pass? This one here, 254 hertz. And the high pass, 81 hertz. That means this effect will only add content between 81 hertz, which is really low. That's lower than the lowest note on an electric guitar. And 254, which is an octave and a half higher than that only. So like roughly about 18 or so frets higher than that. So it's a very narrow range. If we change this, hold on. Let's listen to the snare if we change this low pass filter. Remember, this is just the reverb effect. If we change the high pass, we're cutting out the bass, right? So now let's bring in the original, blended with it. So that's what I started with. Now let's see what the limiter does. I've got the limiter pulled down below. This is going to make it louder. And keep the level more consistent. Now, I know this is like, it's removing some dynamics, but it's also, I want to take care of the dynamics in the mix manually if we need to. But it's a short section of the song. The dynamics can be created in other ways by adding instruments. Then I added another reverb plugin. Let's check this out. This is what this reverb plugin sounds like. It adds a little bit to it. So that's what I did with the snare drum. So let's listen to this bass side now. So the bass guitar. Let's start with the DI. This is what she actually played. Okay? I mean, from her bass guitar. Just kudos to the incredible playing there. Like, flawless. Wow. But that's just the sound of the bass she was playing. So one thing that I found out, and I really find really disturbing to me, is that David Bendeth wouldn't let her use her new bass because it's an active bass. Because active basses, he believes, have side effects of hiss or noise or something. Which is a really strange thing to say when almost every session bass player out there these days is playing active basses as well as passive basses and making tons of money off the active basses. They have their purposes. They give you more control, and they haven't created noise in good quality instruments for a very, 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 very long time. In fact, actually, not even the earliest ones. The earliest active basses were the Music Man basses, designed by Leo Fender, and they have been used on more studio recordings than probably any other active bass in history. So it's like, that doesn't make sense. Alembic active basses, quieter than passive basses. They had less noise. They had built-in XLR outputs in the early models. The one that I owned had that. It's no different from the electronics that are in a board. Why would they add more noise? They're run by batteries, yes, but if it's a well-designed circuit, it doesn't need to add noise. But a brand new 5-digit worth, top-of-the-line, custom-made instrument with renowned electronics and a preamp that's legendary, you don't have to worry about the noise from that. So that was a surprising concept from David Bendeth that it disappointed me. But at the same time, he is a far better producer and engineer than I am. So even though I understand electronics intimately well, and I design my own preamps and I work with this stuff and I know all about noise levels and how to prevent them, I can't argue with the guy about that because he gets far better results than I do, right? But as an electronics guy myself, I don't get these sorts of blanket decisions that are based on incorrect information. It's surprising to me for someone at his level that he would have done that. But regardless, the results are amazing. You wouldn't have been able to tell what bass she was playing from that. If she had played her own bass, it either would have sounded exactly the same or maybe the tone would be slightly different. There would be no more noise. So let's take a look now at what I did to that. I took that and I added a virtual bass amp. So that's the DI directly out, and I kept the level fairly low, but it's still in the mix. Then I added my own bass amp. Now, my own bass amp, and this is a virtual plugin. It's a free one called Bass Deluxe. It emulates basically sort of like a combination of various bass amps extremely well and cabs. So I threw on an SVT 8x10 cab in its emulation. But this is what it sounds like when I turn that on. And I'm overdriving the virtual amp in it. I thought that was a pretty damn awesome bass sound myself. You can still hear the tone of her bass coming through her Spectre. I presume it was a Spectre. It may not have been. Oh, and the irony is that she was still playing an active bass when she recorded, because Oops by David Bendeth. But anyway, that's that. And then I added a sub bass very quietly. I'm not sure if I actually have it in this part. Let me see. No, it's not in this part. This was the Sounds amp. That's the sound of the Sounds amp going through. I liked the sound of the Sounds amp. I've always recorded with Sounds amps. I think they're great. Or cheap competitors. I use a Behringer one, actually. They're amazing sounding. So I added that to the mix to add some of the articulation while still having an overdrive sound. This is what I took out. That was the sound of the SVT amp from the studio. It's a nice sound. It sounds like an SVT through a fridge cab. This is her sub bass. And I know why they added it, added a little bottom end. I think that's cool. I didn't want to use it. Not in this part of the song anyway. Then there's the overdriven bass sound. And I thought it was a horrible sound, so I took that out. Sorry, I just do not like the sound of that overdriven bass sound. So this is my bass track, Alejandro's bass track as I mixed it. Let's jump to another section. So that's with my sub bass. Here's my sub bass. Which I thought sounded way better than his, because his sounds like a sine wave or a triangle wave that's generated an octave lower. Mine is retuned an octave lower using, and it's the actual sound of her bass an octave lower. So I thought that was way cooler. Maybe it's just me. I thought it was really heavy sound though. So that's the bass. Oh, and if we go to the chorus to hear the bass, we get this. Isn't that heavy? Yeah, I thought that was awesome. Guitars. Here's where we go. Oh, cool. So I did all those effects. This is the sound of the track itself that I was given for this. Except as you can hear, I panned it to the left. Whereas they had a pan to the right. So then we add the effects. What did I add? An EQ. I scooped it a bit and brought up the top a little bit because I wanted to make room for the vocal to come through here. Now with my EQ on. See, it's subtle. It adds a little bit of room in the same, there's a certain range where she sings that I wanted to be able to come through. Then we add my effect, which is a right panned reverb, and also with an EQ on it to make sure it's only the very high frequencies that come through. There we go. So it sounds like this. So I thought that was kind of cool. And then we have so this is the panning that came. I like the panning. It was cool. Left and right guitars. All I threw on here, I think, was see, I toned down the high end because I found it really fuzzy. So I brought down the treble quite a bit. Probably the same one here. Yep. And on this one, scoop the middle still. Then we have this effect. Then I went crazy. So for this lead part, it goes like this. I mean, that's an amazing sound. I love that solo. But I'd heard that so much in the original mix that it was actually starting to grate in my head a little bit. So I decided to change it up a lot. So I added chorus, a delay, and a tremolo effect. Let's take a listen. So this is how it was. Then we add a chorus. A chorus is like makes it sound kind of like watery a little bit. Then I added a delay. So the delay effect that I chose, EQing and panning, and then a small delay. Let's take a listen. So there's that echo on the right side with a filter on it to narrow the frequencies. Then I added a tremolo. Tremolo is, imagine a speaker spinning in your head, aiming at each of your ears and panning between them. That's what a tremolo is. Take a listen. I did that because I was looking for a way to make it stand out, but also not just become part of this wall of noise that was the guitars at this point in my head. I wanted it to distinctly sound different. So they're guitar effects, basically. These are all guitar effects. You can have guitar pedals that do this stuff. They're standard decades now. It's been since like people like Hendrix was using stuff like this, right? So yeah, that's what I added there. Then continuing on. That's how it sounds with the other guitars. That's Danny playing the same part basically 4 different times with different pannings and maybe different guitar settings. Isn't that awesome? This is just 2 of them. 4. And then we have the, the cash register. I don't need to play that for you. Then we have the vocals. Okay, so first thing I heard was, let's see if I can find the original. Hey! Whoa! Okay, so that's the entry stuff. That's exactly what I was given. That's the track, Haze and Woes. So it's just a gang of them all singing. Hey! So we can't break that one down. And we added some effects. What are the effects I added? Oh, a delay. So okay, that's interesting. So let's listen to this. So without the delay effect, we have this. This is on the Haze and Woes. So this is a gang vocal. Hey! Then I added this to it to make it more stereo. Hey! It pulls out further separated using a delay effect of 14.1 milliseconds I came up with right there. So it takes the original, pans it hard left, just as it is. No issues. Then it takes a copy of it, pans it hard right. That's 14.1 milliseconds later. And all we hear is the affected sounds. So we've got one that's left original and one that's right. That's 14.1 seconds later, milliseconds later, which is short enough that it doesn't sound like you're late or out of time, but it's long enough that it sounds like a separate person singing there or a separate group of people singing there. It's very cool. It's a standard way to sort of do stereo affecting tricks in studio work. Then we have the lead vocal. That's the track I was given. It had stuff in it that went on. Like I added this. Hold on. Let me show you. It sounded like this. Hey! Whoa! And that was cool, but I thought, hey, that breathy thing she did, it's really cool. Very cool. But I wanted to do something special with it. So I edited that out and I put it into its own track right here. If you look in the big picture here, I'll zoom this in. So I took the piece out here and I moved it down to its own track here. So it's the same thing, basically. But then I did something special with it. I added a pan effect. And the pan is like a real controller. There are knobs on your mixer. And when it came to the start, I panned it hard left, and then I panned it hard right partway through. Because I thought it would sound cool. You like that? I like that. Then we can add our special effects I started adding. So what special effects are there? An exciter. I added a little bit, just a tiny little bit of exciter on the lead vocal. That generates harmonics in the upper part of it. And I made sure that they had some drive to it to add a little bit of grit. And added a amount of reverb. Not a ton, but enough on here. All right, and then in the breath effects, I added some EQ. I took down the low end because there's no need for it there, and it just cleaned it up a bit. Added a tiny little bit of stereo delay to it, but very, very little. Compressor and limiter. That was just to bring up the sound of the so it's a nice controllable level. And you notice how then after this, I edited the lead vocal part down. Let's turn off the lead vocal effects for a sec. Because it sounded like this. There was so much reverb in it. Hear that? Just go. The room noise is huge. I didn't want to hear that, so I edited it out. All right. And I also edited out her breath after she finished the note, so that she wasn't going for the next part. Because breath noises are great, but I thought there was too much of it, and I wanted to hear it more clean. Then I added my effects in, reverb and exciter, and this is what we get. All right. Let's listen to what happens next.
I don't wanna break this down to you.
So here what that is. This I did a send to what? What track is this? There's a send to lead Vox Effects. Okay, there we go. So that's where I wanted that in here. So lead Vox Effects is a track where I just have a delay effect on it. Very narrow EQ. It sounds almost like a telephone effect. I cut down the highs a bit and I cut down the lows a lot. And then I did it even more so when I did a pan to the left afterwards. So take a listen to that effect. See that yellow line here? That's where I turn on the send. I push the signal towards this other fader, the lead Vox Effects here. This will send signal to this one, and this one has these effects on it that we're talking about. So I only do it like basically there's a knob on the board. I turn it on at this point, and then I turn it off again. It's actually a switch, the send switch, but yeah.
This down to you.
So I kind of like that. I did it just at the end because I thought it was cool. I purposely tried to avoid a lot of reverb on the lead vocal, so I added it controlled with my own special effects when I wanted to.
It's a cruel thing that we learn to do.
You like that? I like that. And then after that, let's go to where other people sing. This is the gang vocal that includes the marketing director of Lava Records.
Going once, going twice, sold!
And that effect on it, I can't get rid of. They burned that into the track, which I wish they hadn't, because it's crazy. It sounds like some really wicked effect. But I had a delay to just try to thicken up the stereo effect on it. It's a delay that I showed you earlier where left channel is in real time, right channel is delayed slightly.
Once, twice, sold.
There we go. There's Pow. Oh, there we go. Now you can see it. Let's listen to Pow sing.
Are you worth your weight in gold?
So that's her double tracking it. Once on the left and once on the right. They burned it to this track that way. That's really cool. And then there's a lower one, lower pitch. This is all Pow.
Are you worth your weight in gold?
Isn't that cool? So then we've got a chorus of 4 Pows.
Are you worth your weight in gold?
I just thought that was awesome. Hear it all together? Here we go with the vocals.
Are you worth your weight in gold? Going once, going twice, sold. It's
Right? Cool. All right. So that's basically how I did this. Oh, and on the master fader, I have a multi-band compressor. It's very smooth. It does very little. And a limiter just to make sure we don't exceed the levels we need to hit. One thing I forgot to tell you about was the tom. So her tom, this is what we had. I'm going to turn off the effects for it. This is the actual sound that we were given. Oh, don't do that, Don. Turn it off. There we go. This is the tom sound. So yes, they panned it hard right. I could have changed that, but they panned it hard right, and I thought, it's okay. It's cool that way. She probably wants it that way. It should be at least partially to the right. I've never panned a floor tom all the way to the right like that before. It's a little extreme. I spent more time. I might have mixed it a little bit less hard to the right, but it's a cool sound. That's the sound of her actual tom. Then there's also the sound of a sample that was triggered by it, if you wanted to use that instead, or with it. Which is great. I like it. It's a deep sound. But, so I want to focus on the sound of her actual tom, so I did a lot of stuff to it. I used a compressor to bring up its level and also control its volume a little bit and make sure that the body of it had more depth to it. I had a limiter just to, again, keep the sustain going a little longer so it's a little more rumbly, kind of like the sample adds to it. And then I did a pseudo stereo just a little bit to make it a little bigger sounding. So this is what it sounds like. This is just her tom mic that you originally heard without the sample in it. With my effects. I thought that was cool. And then we add in the sample. See, it does very, very little, the sample. It's almost all up to the sound of her actual tom. But that's where, in the second verse, you hear it start to get rumbly. That's because I wanted to make it sound like the live sound of her toms when she's playing that 4-tom. It's huge in a live theater from what I've seen in cell phone videos. So I wanted it to sound like that. Tom. All right, so let's see here. Who wants to listen to it? It's only a minute long. Just the full mix, just my interpretation. Yeah? You sure? You sure? All right. Here we go.
Hey, whoa, I don't wanna break this down to you. It's a cruel thing that we learn to do. 'Cause we all gotta pay for something, we all gotta count for nothing. Happiness has its price. Less is more in this business. Rapacity will be the illness that we will learn to love. Are you worth your weight in gold? Going once, going twice, sold. It's all about that cold hard cash, hun. Woo! Go ahead and cry, shallow pools of blood, diamond noose at your throat. Hey, whoa, hey, whoa. Moral code of dates 3 times.
There you go. So you can see where there are breaks in it as it plays. That's where I edited out sound because I didn't want noise in the background to come through, because there are background noises in the mics and stuff and bleed and stuff that I wanted this to be drier. So it's a very dry mix, and then I added those bits of reverb and delays and effects to fill it up. I think the kick drum is more hi-fi and a little more metal without being like boomy. It's not as heavy as his, but it's more attacky and sharp. It's still big. The snare is good, maybe not quite as huge as his, but I like the sound of the snare I'm getting right now, but I think it fits in the mix that I've got well. The bass guitar I'm really happy with the sound of. Maybe it could be a little more bottomy, but I really like the grit and the drive of it. The guitars I'm really happy with as well, and the vocals I think sound excellent on this. I'm really happy with my mix, but I'm totally inspired by David Benda's mixing. What I'm doing is an interesting interpretation of what I would like to see in the mix, but he did an exceptional job and is far better at this than I am. I'm just learning from watching what he did. I learned from watching he had like a whole mixing session where he demonstrated how he did some of the things in the song. I've learned a lot from that. So yeah, this is Money. This is my idea of how Money could sound. I think it's kind of neat. It's got some snap to it, and I hope that you guys enjoyed this. It's a little more dry. I hope you guys learned something about how to mix and how you go about thinking about how you might want to mix something. It's kind of fun. All right. Like, subscribe, comment. Hope to see you guys soon. Rock and roll.